For 25 years, they told Victoria Hale she would never walk again. The world's most expensive doctors agreed. The specialists nodded and signed their names on reports that sealed her fate. But a night shift janitor mopping floors in a hospital corridor saw something every one of those doctors had missed. And what he found hiding inside her medical files would shake an empire to its foundation. Someone had stolen 25 years of her life, and they were still in the room with her. This is the story of a woman who was never truly broken, and the man who refused to let the lie stand. If this story pulls you in from the first minute, hit like so more people find it. Drop a comment with the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now stay with me, because this one goes deep. The fluorescent lights in the rehabilitation wing of Mercy General Hospital buzzed with a thin, relentless hum that most people stopped hearing after their first week. Liam Carter had stopped hearing it somewhere around month 3. Now, almost 2 years into the night shift, the sound had become as ordinary to him as his own breathing. Background noise to a life that had slowly compressed itself into something unrecognizable. He pushed his mop cart past room 14, past the empty nurses' station, past the bulletin board with its laminated fire exit diagrams and outdated flu shot flyers, and turned the corner into the private east corridor. This part of the building was different from the rest. The floors were polished to a mirror finish. The walls were painted a warmer shade of white, not the institutional gray beige that coated every other hallway. And the air carried a faint, clean smell, like someone had figured out a way to make hospital air smell like a hotel lobby. It costs money to make a hospital smell like that. Serious money. Liam pressed his mop into the bucket, wrung it out, and kept moving. Room 19 was dark tonight. He could see the thin line of blue light under the door, the standby glow of monitoring equipment, and he registered, without really thinking about it, that the usual ambient light from inside the room was absent. No reading lamp, no television. He almost kept going. He almost did. But something made him slow down. Not a sound exactly. More like the absence of one. A particular kind of quiet that didn't feel like sleep. Liam stopped, set his mop against the wall, listened. Nothing. Then, very faint, a sound like something being dragged, fabric against a hard surface. He knocked twice, soft. "Ma'am? Everything okay in there?" No answer. He tried the door. It wasn't locked. The private rooms on this wing never were, not unless requested, and he pushed it open just enough to lean his head inside. Victoria Hale was on the floor. She had fallen trying to reach the call button, which had slipped off the nightstand edge and dangled there on its cord, 6 inches beyond her reach. She was pushing herself up with both arms, jaw set tight, breathing hard through her nose. She didn't look at him right away. She was focused on the cord. Her fingers brushed it, missed by an inch. "Don't," she said, before he could move. Her voice was precise, sharp. The kind of voice that had spent decades giving instructions and expected them to be followed. "Do not help me. I'm not asking you to." Liam leaned against the doorframe. "Wasn't going to," he said. "I was just going to watch." That made her look up. She had dark eyes. Very dark. The kind that absorbed light rather than reflected it. And they assessed him with an efficiency that was almost clinical. She took in his uniform, his age, the mop cart visible through the open doorway. She filed all of it away in approximately 1 second. "You're the night janitor," she said. "Floor technician," Liam said, "if we're being precise." Something moved across her face. Not quite a smile. More like the possibility of one, briefly considered and then set aside for later. She reached for the cord again. Her fingers closed around it. She pressed the call button, set it back on the nightstand, and then spent the next 90 seconds pulling herself back onto the bed without any help, using upper body strength that most people with functioning legs didn't have. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't smooth. Her hospital gown bunched at the wrong moments, her arms shook near the end, and she made a sound like she'd bitten something when she finally got her weight onto the mattress. Liam watched the whole thing without moving. When she was settled, she turned her head and looked at him again. "You're still here." "You're in my section," he said. "I've got another 40 feet of corridor after this. You fall again and nobody finds you for 3 hours? That's going to be a lot of paperwork for me." The possibility of a smile again, slightly more real this time. What's your name? Liam. Liam Carter. Victoria Hale, she said. Like he didn't already know. Like she needed to say it herself to make it official. I know who you are, Liam said. Does that change how you're standing there? He thought about it. No. She looked at him for another moment, then she reached over and turned on the reading lamp. The room warmed. You can finish your section, she said, and if you want to say something when you pass by on your way back, the door will be open. That was in November. By January, Liam was spending 20 minutes at the end of his shift sitting in the chair beside Victoria Hale's bed, talking about whatever came up. By February, the 20 minutes had stretched to an hour. He was still punching out on time. He'd learned to move faster through the rest of his section. And nobody on the night staff paid much attention, because nobody paid much attention to anything in that corridor after midnight. They talked about all kinds of things. His son, Noah, her company, Hale Medical Group, one of the largest private healthcare conglomerates in the country, which struck Liam as grimly ironic, given that its founder was currently a long-term patient in one of its own rehabilitation facilities. They talked about her father, who had built the original company and died when Victoria was 22, just 2 years after her accident. They talked about the weight of running something you inherited from someone you were still grieving. She was 30 years old and she had been in a wheelchair since she was 5. The accident had happened on a private road near her family's estate. A car, a gatepost, the kind of split-second collision that doesn't seem like it should change everything but does. The spinal damage had been at the thoracic level. She had been told, kindly and repeatedly, and by some of the most credentialed physicians in the world, that her lower body paralysis was permanent, complete. Not the kind of thing you recover from, the kind of thing you adapt to. And she had adapted. That was what made Victoria Hale remarkable. Not the empire she'd built or the 12-figure net worth. It was the sheer grinding efficiency with which she'd adapted to a world that wasn't designed for her, and then reshaped that world into something that fit. Her office building had been custom architected when she bought it. Her vehicle was bespoke. She had never asked for help that she didn't need, and she had never accepted pity in any form. But she was also, Liam had begun to realize, profoundly exhausted. Not from the paralysis, from the pretending, from the performance of certainty that every person in a position of power has to maintain, especially women in wheelchairs, especially women in wheelchairs running billion-dollar companies in rooms full of men who are always, in some small part of their minds, waiting for her to fail. "Do you get tired of it?" he asked her one night. February, cold outside. The heating vents in the wing clicked steadily. Of what specifically? All of it. The board meetings, the press stuff, the whole version of yourself you have to perform. She was quiet for a moment, not offended, thinking. "I get tired," she said, "of people deciding what my limits are before they've bothered to understand them." Liam nodded. He understood that in a different context, but he understood it. "Does your therapy team do that?" "My therapy team," Victoria said, with a careful flatness that meant something, "is excellent at what they do." It was the way she said it, the exact deliberate neutrality of it. Liam had been a janitor long enough to know that when someone speaks with that kind of careful flatness about something, they've practiced not saying more. He let it go that night, but he thought about it for a week. The rehabilitation wing kept its schedule boards in the corridor outside the therapy rooms. Printed sheets in plastic holders, updated each Monday, showing which patients had which sessions blocked out for the week. Most patients got a mix of physical therapy, occupational therapy, neurological assessment, and rest periods. The schedules were color-coded. Pretty straightforward. Victoria's schedule, Liam noticed one Thursday night, had a lot of gray on it. Gray was rest. Gray was unstructured time. Gray was empty. For the company's founder and primary patient advocate of Hale Medical Group, the woman whose public commitment to cutting-edge rehabilitation was a core part of the organization's brand, Victoria Hale was receiving a very conservative amount of active therapy. Liam stood in the hallway and looked at the board for a while. He wasn't a medical professional. He knew that. He'd taken a few continuing education courses at the community college, basic anatomy, medical terminology, because he'd thought at one point about training as an EMT before Noah's situation made the scheduling impossible. He understood enough to know that he didn't understand much, but he understood schedules. He understood gaps. He understood what it looked like when something was structured to keep someone occupied rather than to help them progress. He didn't say anything to Victoria yet. Instead, he went to the archives room. The hospital archives occupied half a basement level that smelled like old paper and industrial lubricant from the building systems running overhead. Medical records from before digitization were stored in bankers' boxes stacked on metal shelves, organized by year and then alphabetically. It wasn't complicated to find things if you knew how to look and had legitimate reasons to be in the building at 2 in the morning. Liam had been moving through this building for almost 2 years. He knew which doors were unlocked and when. He knew which staff members stayed at their stations and which ones drifted. He wasn't proud of the fact that he'd mapped the building's rhythms the way a person maps a neighborhood they've lived in long enough to feel uneasy. But that knowledge existed in him now, and it was useful. He found the Hale files in less than 20 minutes. They were thicker than he expected. Victoria had been at Mercy General, or connected to it in some official capacity, since before she was old enough to have a say in her own care. The early records were from other institutions, transferred in and filed here. He leafed through them quickly, not reading, just getting a sense of the shape of the thing. 3 separate folders: original treatment records, transfer summaries, and a third folder, thinner, with a white label that someone had written on in faded blue ink: Review, Archived. He opened the third folder. Inside were 6 documents, consultation reports from physicians he didn't recognize. The names were real enough, and several had institutional headers from major medical centers. He read them slowly, or as slowly as he could while standing in a basement at 2 a.m. with a flashlight, because the overhead bulb in that section had been out for 3 weeks. The reports were from a 7-year window. Victoria would have been between 9 and 16 years old. They were written in the dense, precise language of neurological specialists, and Liam had to work through some of the terminology. But the conclusion he kept arriving at, reading and rereading certain sections, was consistent across multiple independent assessments. Residual neural activity detected in L1 to L3 segments, inconsistent with complete lesion classification. Recommend expanded diagnostic protocol before confirming permanent SCI designation. Patient demonstrates atypical motor response patterns during passive range testing. Current treatment plan does not reflect the full scope of potential intervention available. We do not believe the evidence supports a diagnosis of permanent complete paralysis at this time. We strongly recommend referral to the specialist program at Redacted for further evaluation. Redacted. Liam went back through the other documents. 2 more redactions, one in a footnote, one in what looked like a referral form. The redactions weren't digital. They were physical. Dark marker, applied to the paper. Someone had blacked out the names of programs and facilities that had been recommended to treat Victoria Hale as a child. Liam stood in the basement with those 6 pages in his hands and felt a cold that had nothing to do with the temperature. He put the folder back exactly as he'd found it. He went upstairs and finished his shift. He punched out and drove to the 24-hour diner on Fletcher Street and sat in a booth by the window with a cup of coffee he didn't drink, and he thought for a long time. He told himself it might mean nothing. Records got redacted for legal reasons. Facilities closed, programs got discontinued, referring physicians died or retired, and institutional affiliations became complicated. There were 100 bureaucratic explanations for redacted names in a 30-year-old medical file. He also knew, in the part of himself that didn't deal in comfortable explanations, that redacted names in a file that was supposed to be supporting a child's long-term care was not normal. He spent the next 2 weeks researching. It was slow work, and it had to happen in pieces. During breaks, on his nights off, sitting at the kitchen table after Noah was asleep with his laptop and a cup of instant coffee, searching names and institutions and medical programs from the late 90s and early 2000s. The specialists whose names appeared in those reports were findable, most of them. Several had published extensively. 3 were still practicing. 2 were retired. 1 had died in 2011. Liam reached out to the retired ones first. He identified himself as a healthcare worker conducting background research, which was technically true if you squinted, and asked broad questions about treatment programs from that era. Most didn't respond. One responded curtly and formally, and one, a retired neurologist named Dr. Raymond Birch, who had spent 30 years studying incomplete spinal cord injuries before retiring to a small town in Vermont, wrote back a detailed, careful, and deeply troubled email. I treated several patients in that cohort, Birch wrote. 2 of them achieved significant recovery outcomes through the experimental stimulation program I was running at the time. A third patient, I cannot provide identifying information, was referred to me based on presenting indicators that strongly suggested incomplete injury classification. That referral was withdrawn before the patient was ever assessed in my program. I never understood why. I tried to follow up twice through official channels and was told the case had been closed. The timing of that withdrawal and the lack of explanation has bothered me for 30 years. I hope your research finds what it's looking for. Liam read that email 4 times. Then he made a decision that he knew was going to complicate his life considerably. He told Victoria. He didn't lead with the documents. He didn't come at it with a theory. He just started asking her questions, careful ones, tucked into their regular conversations, about what she remembered of her early treatment, who made decisions, who held the files. Victoria noticed immediately. "You're not asking these things randomly," she said one night. It was late March. Rain against the windows. She'd been reviewing quarterly projections on her tablet and had set it face down when he came to the door, which meant she'd been waiting. Something happened. "I found something," Liam said. "I don't know what it means yet." "Show me." "Not yet. I want to be sure first." Her expression sharpened. She was used to people being careful with information around her. Selective, protective, managing. The idea that someone might be careful with it for her, rather than from her, seemed to catch her slightly off guard. "Liam, I know. If there's something in my files, I know," he said. "Give me a week." She looked at him for a long moment. She had the eyes of someone who'd been lied to by careful, professional people for most of her life, and she was very good at reading faces. Whatever she saw in his made her sit back. "1 week," she said. In that week, Liam drove to 3 different medical facilities in the region, talked his way into 2 records departments with varying degrees of success, and made 6 more contact attempts with former staff of rehabilitation programs that had operated in the early 2000s. He found 2 more pieces. The first was a transfer authorization form from when Victoria was 12, moving her primary care from one specialist group to another. The form was routine, except that in the section where the referring physician was supposed to sign off, the signature was absent. In its place was a typed note. Authorization provided by executive guardian representative per power of attorney documentation on file. Victoria's father had been alive when she was 12. He was in excellent health. He had not been incapacitated in any way that would have required someone else to act as his representative in medical decisions for his daughter. The second piece was harder to find and harder to understand. It was a brief internal memo from a hospital administrator written in 2003, referencing a policy decision about Victoria's care plan. The memo was mundane on its surface, scheduling, insurance coverage structure, long-term care protocols. But buried in the second paragraph was a single sentence that Liam read and then read again until it stopped feeling surreal. Per instruction from the primary executive managing the Hale family account, the patient's treatment classification is to remain unchanged and no new specialist referrals are to be initiated without prior approval. The primary executive managing the Hale family account, not Victoria's father, not her doctors, an executive. Liam sat in his car in the parking structure of the third facility and stared at that sentence for a long time. Then he drove back to the city. He told her everything that night. He sat in the chair beside her bed with the documents, photographs he'd taken on his phone, arranged on the screen of his tablet, and he walked her through it. He didn't editorialize. He didn't try to construct the full picture. He just showed her what he'd found and what he'd been able to confirm and where the gaps were. Victoria didn't speak for most of it. She sat very still with her hands in her lap and her face completely controlled in a way that Liam had come to understand was not coldness, but its opposite. The way she contained things that were too large to let out in a hospital room at midnight. When he was done, she was quiet for a full minute. "Who is the executive?" she finally said. "I don't know yet. The documents don't name them. They reference the position. Someone who has authority over what they called the Hale family account. That's not a medical term." "No," Liam said. "It's a financial one." Victoria's jaw tightened slightly. "My father set up a family management trust before he died. He was already sick when I was 20. He put a senior executive in charge of both the business and the family legal structure until I turned 30 and could formally take control." "Did you turn 30? 2 months ago. And did you formally take control?" She looked at him. Something behind her eyes had gone very quiet and very focused. "I'm supposed to," she said carefully, "pending the completion of my medical review. A board determination about whether I'm capable of resuming full executive authority given my ongoing condition." "Who determines that?" She didn't answer right away. "Who determines that, Victoria?" "The trust executive," she said, "and the board he controls." The rain hit the windows. The monitoring equipment beeped its slow, steady rhythm. "Liam," she said. "Yeah. This is bigger than missing referrals in an old file." "I know." She turned her head and looked out the window at the wet, dark city below. "I've been in this building for 8 months, she said. Her voice was very even. "I requested an extended stay for intensive rehabilitation. I thought it would help. I thought maybe this time something would be different." She paused. "I've been asking my therapy team for 6 months about escalating the program. They keep telling me the plan is appropriate and we should proceed carefully. They keep telling me my progress is good, but gradual. Patience." A short, precise sound. Not quite a laugh. "I've been told to be patient for 25 years. "You've been told a lot of things," Liam said. She turned back to him. Her dark eyes were bright in the low light, and he could see the things she was containing. Not grief exactly, and not anger exactly, but some compound of both that had been building pressure for a very long time. "I need you to keep going," she said. "Whatever you've been doing, I need you to find the name." "I will," Liam said. "This could get complicated." "It's already complicated." She looked at him steadily. "You have a son." "I know." "I'm not asking you to—" "Victoria," he said it quietly. "I'm not doing this because you're asking me to. I'm doing it because somebody spent 25 years stealing something from you, and I found it, and I can't unknow that." He picked up his tablet. "So I'm going to keep going." She was quiet. Then, "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Liam said. He stood up and looked at her for a moment in the warm circle of the reading lamp. "Get some sleep." He went back out into the corridor, collected his mop cart, and finished his section. The fluorescent lights buzzed. The hospital breathed around him in its nighttime rhythms. Somewhere down the hall, a monitor beeped. Somewhere below, the city went on doing what cities do. Liam Carter pushed his cart to the end of the east wing and stood there for a moment, looking at the polished floor and the warm painted walls and the door to room 19 where a woman who had been lied to for most of her life was trying to sleep. Then he pulled out his phone, opened his notes app, and wrote down everything he still needed to find. There was a lot. He started at the top and worked his way down. Yes. 2 days later, he called Dr. Raymond Birch in Vermont. Birch answered on the third ring. His voice was careful and dry, the voice of someone who'd spent a career saying precise things in difficult situations. "You're the one who emailed," Birch said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir." "You said you were a healthcare worker." "I am. Night shift, Mercy General." A pause. "That's where the Hale woman is." "Yes, sir." Another pause, longer. "What exactly are you telling me?" "I'm telling you," Liam said carefully, "that I think the patient whose referral was withdrawn, I think I might know who she is, and I think her situation hasn't changed because someone made sure it wouldn't." The silence on the line stretched out long enough that Liam started to wonder if Birch had set the phone down. Then the old man said very quietly, "Send me what you have." Liam exhaled. "Okay." "I'm not promising anything," Birch said. "I'm 71 years old and I've been retired for 6 years, and if this is what I think it might be, there are going to be people with a lot more resources than either of us who don't want this to go anywhere." "I know," Liam said. "So you understand what you're starting?" "I think so." "No," Birch said, and his voice was neither unkind nor particularly gentle. "You don't, but you will." He hung up. Liam stood in the parking lot behind the hospital in the cold March air, watching his breath mist and dissolve. Noah had a therapy appointment in 4 hours. Liam needed to sleep. He had 18 hours until his next shift started. He got in his car and drove home, and he lay down on his bed without changing his clothes, and he stared at the ceiling for a long time, running through names and documents and gaps in his head, arranging and rearranging the pieces of a puzzle he still couldn't see the full shape of. Somewhere in another part of the city, in a hospital room with warm walls and monitored breathing and a reading lamp left on against the dark, Victoria Hale was doing the same thing. They were both, in their different ways, just beginning to understand what they were up against. Dr. Raymond Birch called back 48 hours after Liam sent the files. It was 6:15 in the morning. Liam had been awake since 5, sitting at the kitchen table with Noah's cereal bowl from the night before still in the drying rack and a cup of coffee going cold beside his laptop. He'd been looking at the same document for 20 minutes without actually reading it. The kind of exhausted staring that passes for thinking when you haven't slept properly in a week. His phone buzzed. Vermont area code. "I've looked at everything you sent me," Birch said, without preamble. "I need you to understand something before we go any further. What you're describing, if the pattern holds, this isn't a documentation error. This isn't one physician dropping the ball or a program being defunded. What you're describing is a sustained, deliberate intervention in a child's medical care over a period of more than a decade." Liam said nothing. He'd known this, in some part of himself, since the night he'd stood in the basement with a flashlight. Hearing it said aloud by a 71-year-old neurologist in Vermont made it feel different, heavier. "The referral that was withdrawn," Birch continued, "the one I mentioned in my email. I went back through my records last night. I still have paper files from that period. I kept everything, habit of the field. The referral came through a standard channel, a colleague of mine at a regional center. The patient was a minor. The clinical notes accompanying the referral described exactly the kind of incomplete injury profile that my program was designed to assess." A pause. 2 days before the scheduled intake appointment, I received a phone call from an administrative representative. Not a physician, an administrator. They told me the family had decided not to pursue the referral. I asked to speak with the attending physician. I was told that wasn't possible. I asked for a written confirmation of the family's decision. I never received one. "Did you try to follow up with the family directly?" "The patient was a minor. Access to the family went through the administrative structure of the institution managing her care. I had no independent means of contact." Birch's voice carried something that wasn't quite guilt, but was adjacent to it. The particular discomfort of a person who had done the right thing within the system and always suspected the system had failed them. "I filed a concern report with the relevant medical board. I don't know what happened to it." Liam pressed his palm against the kitchen table. "Dr. Birch, if that patient were to come to your program now, 30 years later, what would you be looking for?" A long pause. "The science has moved considerably since then," Birch said slowly. "What we were doing in the early 2000s was relatively primitive by current standards. But the fundamental question, whether the injury was truly complete, whether there was residual neural pathway activity that could be stimulated and developed, that question can still be answered. With modern imaging and electrophysiological assessment, we'd know within a few sessions whether there was anything to work with. And if there was, then the question becomes how much function can be recovered and over what timeline and at what cost in terms of pain and effort. Recovery from a long-standing incomplete spinal injury is not, I want to be honest with you, it is not a simple thing. It's not a switch you flip. It's months, possibly years, of intensive rehabilitation. It's setbacks. It's a great deal of pain. But it's possible. If the original assessment was correct, if she was misclassified, if the injury was incomplete and the residual pathways were left unstimulated for decades, then yes, the possibility exists. It is significantly harder now than it would have been when she was 9 or 12 or 16. The neural pathways that go unused for 30 years don't disappear entirely, but they atrophy. Reconnecting them requires aggressive, specialized intervention. Another pause. It also requires that the patient want to do it. That part is not small. After he hung up, Liam sat still for a minute. Then he got up and woke Noah for school. His son was 8 years old and walked with a leg brace on the left side, a congenital condition that affected his gait and required ongoing physical therapy that insurance covered about 60% of, which meant the remaining 40% came out of whatever Liam could put aside from his hourly wage after rent and groceries and utilities. Noah was a cheerful, stubborn kid who had inherited his father's tendency to observe things carefully before speaking, and who had recently developed a deep and exclusive interest in trains that Liam encouraged because it was specific and specific interests were good. "You look tired," Noah said over his cereal. "I am tired." "Did you not sleep again?" "I slept some." Noah considered this with the judicial air of an 8-year-old who had heard this answer before and had formed a settled opinion about its accuracy. "You should sleep more." "You're right," Liam said. "Eat your breakfast." He drove Noah to school, came back, slept for 3 hours, and was back at Mercy General by 2 in the afternoon, 6 hours before his shift started. He had a different kind of business there today. The therapy scheduling coordinator was a woman named Darlene who had worked the day desk in the rehabilitation wing for 11 years, and who had, in Liam's experience, the patient but fundamentally immovable energy of someone who has seen every variety of human problem and resolved most of them with a laminated policy sheet. He caught her during the afternoon lull, when the corridor was quiet and the therapy rooms were between sessions. "I have kind of an unusual question," he said. Darlene looked up from her monitor. She recognized him. They'd had dozens of brief corridor conversations over 2 years, but her expression was cautiously neutral in the way that people's expressions get when someone from outside their lane starts asking questions about things inside it. "I'm not going to pretend this is routine," Liam said, "because it's not. I'm asking about a specific patient's therapy schedule, and I know that's not something you'd normally discuss with the cleaning crew." "That's correct," Darlene said. "I'm not asking for medical information. I'm asking about the scheduling structure. Whether the schedule for a particular patient reflects the standard protocol for their classification, or whether there's been some kind of deviation from standard practice." Darlene's expression had shifted from cautiously neutral to specifically attentive in the way that someone's face shifts when they recognize that a conversation is more serious than it appeared. "Who are you asking about?" "Victoria Hale." She was quiet for a moment. Her hands moved to her keyboard but didn't type anything. "Why are you asking me this?" "Because I've been looking at her schedule board for 2 months and something doesn't look right to me. And I don't have the medical background to know whether I'm wrong about that." "You're night shift maintenance," Darlene said. "I am." "This is significantly outside your job description." "I know that too." She looked at him for a long time. She had the expression of a person working through a careful internal calculation. What she knew, what she was permitted to say, what her conscience was telling her about the gap between those two things. "I can't discuss a patient's medical protocols with you," she said finally. "What I can tell you is that scheduling in this wing is reviewed monthly by a senior clinical supervisor, and that the parameters for any given patient's program are set by the attending physician and approved through the administrative structure." "Who's the administrative supervisor for this wing?" "Dr. Marcus Webb. He's the director of rehabilitation services." "Does he set the parameters himself, or does he approve parameters proposed by the attending physicians?" Something flickered in Darlene's face. "Usually the attending proposes and the director approves." "And for high-profile patients? Private wing patients?" The flicker again, more sustained this time. "Occasionally the director takes a more hands-on interest in specific cases." Liam nodded slowly. Does Dr. Webb have any connection to the Hale Medical Group's administrative structure outside of his hospital role? Darlene's hands went very still on the keyboard. I think, she said carefully, that you should be very careful about what you're looking into. I'm being careful. I don't think you understand what careful means in this context. Her voice was low and even. Marcus Webb has been at this institution for 14 years. He has significant relationships with the board, with administration, with the corporate governance structure of several of the institutional partners. She paused. He is not someone who responds well to scrutiny. Has anyone tried? Another silence, longer. A physical therapist, Darlene said at last, very quietly, raised a concern about a patient's progress evaluation 18 months ago. She filed an internal report suggesting the treatment plan wasn't aligned with current best practices. She stopped. What happened to her? She doesn't work here anymore. Liam held Darlene's gaze. Did she leave voluntarily? Her contract wasn't renewed, Darlene said. The official reason was a restructuring of the PT department. She turned back to her monitor. Her face had closed down. I've told you more than I should have. I suggest you be very careful, Mr. Carter, for your own sake. Liam thanked her and left. He sat in his car in the parking garage for 15 minutes, running his thumb over the edge of his phone, thinking about Noah's therapy appointments, and the 40% gap, and his lease, which was up in July, and whether any of this was something he could walk away from if he chose to. He couldn't. He'd known that since the basement. He started the car. He told Victoria that evening. She listened without expression, the contained stillness she used when information was too significant to process with her face, while he laid out Birch's assessment, Darlene's carefully indirect warning, and the connection forming between Dr. Webb and the administrative structure that had been managing her care. Marcus Webb, she said when he finished. Her voice was flat. You know him. He's been the director here since before I became a patient. He was recommended to me personally by my company's medical advisory board as the appropriate specialist to oversee my rehabilitation program. Recommended by who on the board? A beat. By the trust executive. The words sat between them. His name is Gerald Forsyth, Victoria said. She said it the way you say the name of something you've been looking at from a careful distance for a long time without letting yourself see it clearly. He's been the senior executive managing the Hale Family Trust since my father structured it in 2002. He has been, in every formal sense, the second most powerful person in my company for 24 years. And he controls the board. He controls enough of it. The trust structure gives him proxy authority over approximately 40% of voting shares until the formal transfer of control is completed, which requires a medical clearance from Dr. Marcus Webb. She said it slowly, like she was hearing the shape of it for the first time, even though she'd been inside it for years. Who determines whether I am capable of resuming full executive authority? The room was very quiet. Victoria. Liam leaned forward slightly in the chair. Has Forsyth ever said anything to you about your medical situation? About recovery? About the program here? She thought about it. He has always been supportive, concerned. He visits regularly. He's been present at several of my consultations with Webb. She paused. He cried when I first arrived here. He held my hand and said he hoped this program would finally give me some answers. A short, precise pause. He seemed very sincere. How much is the company worth? Victoria looked at him. Hale Medical Group's current market capitalization is approximately $11 billion. Liam sat back. $11 billion. A man who controlled 40% of the voting structure of an $11 billion company through a trust that remained active only while its designated beneficiary was medically incapacitated. He needed you to stay in the chair, Liam said. Victoria didn't answer. Her hands were very still in her lap. Her face was controlled, but there was something at the edges of it, around her eyes, in the set of her jaw, that was shifting. Something that had been locked into a particular position for a very long time and was beginning, slowly and painfully, to move. I need to make a phone call, she said. To who? To my personal attorney, the one Forsyth doesn't know about. She looked at Liam directly. I'm not entirely without resources. I've spent the last 18 months quietly restructuring certain things. I didn't know what I was preparing for. I thought I was just being cautious. A pause. Maybe some part of me knew. What does your attorney need? Everything you have. Every document, every photograph, every email from Birch. I can have it organized and sent tonight. Good. She reached for her tablet, then she stopped and looked back at him. Liam. Yeah. How's your son? The question landed differently than he expected. After everything they'd just been through in that conversation, the sheer ordinariness of it. He's good, Liam said. He's really into trains right now, like the history of railroad infrastructure. He made me watch a 2-hour documentary about the Transcontinental Railroad last weekend. Something softened in Victoria's face. Real softness, not performed. How old is he? 8? Does he know what you do at night? He knows I clean things. He thinks that's pretty normal. Liam paused. He's a good kid. Better than I deserve, honestly. His mother, she left when he was 2. It's been a while. He said it simply, without the weight that it used to carry. Some things just became facts eventually. Victoria nodded slowly. She didn't offer condolences. He appreciated that. Get me those documents, she said. The next 10 days had a quality of sustained, careful tension, like the period before a storm when the air pressure changes and animals go quiet and you know something is building even if you can't see the clouds yet. Liam organized everything, the archived documents, the photographs, Birch's emails, his own notes from his conversation with Darlene, into a structured file that he encrypted and sent to Victoria's attorney, a woman named Claire Huang, who had apparently been Victoria's law school acquaintance and who practiced corporate litigation out of an office 40 miles from the city. Claire called Victoria the morning after receiving the file, and they spoke for 2 hours. Liam wasn't part of that conversation, but Victoria told him afterward that Claire's response had been, in her exact words, controlled fury. She says it's enough to open an investigation, Victoria told him. Not enough to take to a board meeting yet. She needs the financial records, specifically the trust accounting from 2002 to present. How does she get those? Very carefully, through channels that Forsyth doesn't monitor. Victoria paused. She also wants to speak with Birch directly. She thinks a signed statement from him about the withdrawn referral could be significant. Liam reached out to Birch again. The old man agreed without hesitation, though he insisted on doing it by phone rather than video, which Claire found acceptable. While that was happening, Liam was also spending his nights moving through the hospital with a slightly different kind of attention. Not reckless. He was deliberate about not drawing attention, but observant in a way that was now purposeful rather than incidental. Dr. Marcus Webb was in his late 50s. He moved through the rehabilitation wing with the practiced ease of a man who owned it, which in some institutional sense he did. He was present for Victoria's weekly evaluation sessions, which lasted 30 minutes, and which Victoria had described to Liam as consisting primarily of Webb asking her questions about her subjective experience of her condition while referring to notes he never showed her. Liam had never been able to directly observe one of these sessions. But he noticed things in the margins. Webb arriving in the corridor before those sessions looking unhurried and leaving afterward with the specific briskness of someone who had completed a task. The way Webb's 2 regular clinical assistants, both of whom reported directly to him rather than to the general PT department, moved around Victoria's room with a proprietary air. The way they sometimes took files from the cart outside her door to the director's office rather than to the central records area. He noticed something else too. Webb made a phone call from the private alcove at the far end of the east corridor every Thursday at approximately 11:45 at night. Liam had seen him there twice, standing half-turned toward the wall, speaking in a low voice. The third time Liam saw him there, he moved his cart closer than usual and worked slowly on a stretch of floor he'd already cleaned. He couldn't hear specific words, but he heard the cadence, short clipped statements, pauses, the kind of rhythm that comes from giving updates to someone who asks pointed questions. Thursday nights, weekly updates. Regular and deliberate. He mentioned it to Victoria. Thursday nights, she said. Every week. Same time, same spot. Forsyth's standing call is Thursday nights, she said slowly. He has a standing executive check-in call with the board's administrative committee every Thursday at 11:30. She looked at Liam with an expression that had gone still and very focused. He added it to my own calendar once by accident when he was setting up a meeting. He laughed it off. I forgot about it. You didn't forget about it, Liam said. She looked at him. You remembered it just now. She said nothing, but her jaw set in that particular way. Then things shifted. It was a Wednesday night, third week of April, and Liam was in the supply corridor when he heard voices coming from Webb's office. This was unusual. Webb didn't work late on Wednesdays. Liam moved quietly and positioned himself at the end of the connecting hallway where the sound carried through a ventilation gap above the office door. Two voices. Webb's, which he recognized, and another, older, measured, with the careful precision of someone who chose their words with cost in mind. She's been asking questions, the second voice said. My sources indicate she's been in contact with outside counsel. That's not necessarily she's always had an attorney. Not this attorney. Claire Huang. Huang specializes in corporate fraud litigation. A pause. This is no longer a containment situation, Marcus. We need to accelerate the timeline. The timeline for what, exactly? Webb's voice had a strained quality. You want me to file the capacity assessment early? The board will question the change in schedule. Tell them her condition has shown concerning regression. Document it in the current evaluation cycle. I need the formal assessment completed and filed before the end of May. Gerald, before the end of May, Marcus. No ambiguity in it, no discussion. A silence. And the janitor, the second voice continued. Liam stopped breathing. I don't know what you're referring to, Webb said. The night maintenance employee who's been spending time in her corridor. My people noticed him in the archives 3 weeks ago. I'd like to know who he is and why he was there. A longer silence. I'll look into it. Do more than look into it. I want him reassigned off this wing, tonight if possible. Liam moved back down the corridor before the voices could grow closer to the door. He walked to the elevator bay at normal pace, collected his cart from where he'd parked it, and finished the last 40 minutes of his section with sweat on the back of his neck and his mind running very fast and very quiet. He texted Victoria from the parking lot after his shift. Something happened. Don't use the room phone or the hospital Wi-Fi for anything. I'll explain tomorrow. Her response came 3 minutes later. Understood. Be careful. He drove home. Noah was asleep. Liam sat at the kitchen table and thought through what he'd heard with the same systematic focus he'd been applying to documents and schedules, stripping the emotion out of it, organizing the facts. Forsyth had people watching the wing, possibly watching Liam specifically. Webb was going to manufacture a regression in Victoria's condition to support an early capacity assessment, which meant, under the trust structure, that Forsyth could delay or block the transfer of control indefinitely, potentially permanently restructuring the governance so that transfer became impossible. And someone, Webb, Forsyth, one of their people, was going to try to remove Liam from the equation. He had maybe 48 hours before his reassignment came through, possibly less. He opened his laptop and wrote a detailed account of everything he'd overheard, time-stamped and specific, and emailed it to Claire Huang with a note that said, "This needs to happen faster than we planned." Claire responded at 6 in the morning. "I know. I've been looking at the trust accounting. You need to see what I found. Can you meet me today?" Claire Huang's office was in a converted Victorian row house 40 miles from the city, the kind of office that looked like it was designed to make you feel calm, which Liam suspected was tactical on her part. She was 40, compact and precise, with the particular stillness of someone who spent their days building arguments out of complicated information. She had a lot of paper spread across her conference table. "Sit down," she said. No small talk. "I'm going to show you something, and I need your reaction because you've spent more time inside that institution than I have." She walked him through the trust accounting in broad strokes. She was careful about what she showed him in full and what she summarized, which told him the legal angles were already in play. But the overall picture was clear enough. Between 2002 and the present, Gerald Forsyth had, Through a series of layered transactions and affiliated entities, positioned himself to benefit from 23% of Hale Medical Group's net annual revenue through what was structured on paper as a management services agreement. 23% of the annual revenue of an $11 billion company. Not the valuation, the annual revenue, which ran to roughly $3 billion per year for 24 years. That's, Liam started. Over $500 million, Claire said. Conservatively. Possibly more when you account for the equity positions. She sat down across from him. He didn't steal it outright. He structured it so the company paid him for management services that were loosely defined enough to be almost unquestionable. It's been buried in the governance documents under language that would take a forensic accountant weeks to fully untangle. But you found it. I found it because I was specifically looking for it, and I know what these structures look like. She folded her hands on the table. Liam, the moment Victoria formally takes control of this company, she can order a full audit. Within 60 days, this would be exposed. He has known that for years. Keeping her in that chair, keeping her officially incapacitated, is worth $500 million to Gerald Forsyth. The room was very quiet. We need to move, Claire said. Not in a week. I need to file injunctive motions by Friday that would freeze Forsyth's authority to act on the trust before Webb can file that capacity assessment. But to do that, I need Victoria to sign several things. And I need one more piece. I need documented evidence that the treatment suppression was directed by Forsyth specifically. Right now I can show financial motive and administrative pattern. I need the link between Forsyth and the early decisions about her care. Birch's statement gets me close. It doesn't close the loop. I need something from inside the institution, something that shows Forsyth's direct involvement in decisions about her medical care. Liam looked at the papers on the table for a moment. Then he thought about the file in the basement, the third folder, the memo that referenced the primary executive managing the Hale family account. I know where it is, he said. Claire looked at him carefully. How would you access it? The same way I accessed it before. That's not admissible if it's obtained improperly. I photographed existing institutional records in an area I have legitimate access to during the course of my employment. I didn't remove anything. I didn't break anything. He paused. I've already been in there once. I know what's there. She considered that. Get me a clear, complete photograph of that memo, everything on it. Date, header, the full text, every word. A pause. And be careful. If what you overheard last night is accurate, Forsyth is already watching. I know. She gathered some of the papers from the table. I need Victoria's signatures this afternoon. Can you... I'll get her on the phone with you. In person is better. Can she... I'll figure it out. Getting Victoria off the hospital's network was simple enough. Liam's personal hotspot, a brief explanation, and Victoria's unsurprised expression when she understood why. Getting her in a private space for a call with Claire required slightly more creativity, but the hospital had a small garden terrace at the east end of the building that was underused in the shoulder season of spring and that Victoria could access from the rehabilitation wing with reasonable privacy. They managed it that afternoon. Liam ran interference, not dramatically, just by being where he was supposed to be and moving naturally, while Victoria positioned herself in the corner of the terrace farthest from the building entrance. The call lasted 40 minutes. When it was over, Victoria was very still in her chair, looking at the spindly April trees along the terrace edge. Claire explained the financial structure, she said when Liam sat down on the bench beside her. Yeah. 24 years. Her voice was level, terrifyingly level. He sat across from me at board meetings. He came to my birthday dinner. He put his hand on my shoulder at my father's funeral and said... She stopped. Her jaw worked slightly. He said my father would have been proud of what the company had become. Liam didn't say anything. The company my father built, she said. The one my father asked him to protect. She let out a breath that was slow and hard and not quite steady. Gerald Forsyth was my father's closest friend. That was the piece Liam hadn't known. He sat with it. I'm sorry, he said. Not a performance, just the truth of it. Victoria was quiet for a moment. The trees moved in a slight cold wind. Somewhere on the street below, a car horn sounded and faded. "When my father was dying," she said, "he told me Forsyth would look after things, that I didn't need to be afraid, that there would be someone who knew the company, knew the family, knew how everything worked." She paused. "He said it like it was a gift." Liam looked at her profile, the controlled, precise line of her face, and the thing that was moving underneath it, pressing against the surface from the inside. "He wanted to protect you," Liam said. "He just chose the wrong person." Victoria's throat moved, one small motion of swallowing something down. "I need that memo," she said. "I'm getting it tonight." She turned to look at him. Her dark eyes were very steady. "You understand that if they're watching this wing, you going back into that basement is a risk." "I'll be careful." "Liam." Something in her voice shifted. Not softer exactly, but more direct, like she'd set down something she'd been carrying at a careful distance. "I need you to understand that this is not... I'm not asking you to risk your job or your son's stability or anything else because of me. You didn't choose this. You found something and you came to me with it, and I am grateful for that. But it doesn't mean you owe me anything." He looked at her for a moment. "I know that." "Then why?" "Because it's the right thing," he said simply. "And because I'm going to be pretty annoyed with myself for the rest of my life if I stop now." She held his gaze for a moment longer, then she turned back to the trees. "Get the memo," she said. "Yeah." He went back inside. That night, Liam moved through his section at normal pace, at normal times, and nothing about it looked different from any other night. He finished the east corridor, cleaned the utility alcove, refilled 2 supply stations, and at 2:17 in the morning, walked down to the basement with his cart. He'd been thinking about the surveillance angle since Claire's warning. The archives room had no camera. He'd checked that months ago, early in all this, without knowing why he was checking. The corridor leading to it had one camera, mounted at the far end, angled down. He knew its field of view from 2 years of cleaning that hallway. He approached from the perpendicular, stayed close to the wall below the camera's angle, and was inside the archives room inside of 45 seconds. The folder was where he'd left it. He found the memo in under 2 minutes. He knew exactly where it was. He photographed it 4 times from different angles, checking clarity after each shot. The institutional header was visible. The date was readable. And the sentence about the primary executive managing the Hale family account was clear and unambiguous. He was back in the main corridor in under 10 minutes. He transferred the photos to his encrypted cloud drive, sent them to Claire's secure email, and finished the last section of his shift. At 3:45, as he was clocking out, his supervisor, a decent man named Earl, who always smelled faintly of the peppermint candies he kept in his shirt pocket, stopped him at the desk. "Hey, Liam, got a schedule change for you. Starting next week, you're being moved to the West Wing, building maintenance." Liam looked at him. "Who requested the reassignment?" Earl looked uncomfortable. "It came from above my level. HR approved it. I don't have more detail than that." He paused. "I'm sorry, man. I don't make these calls." "I know," Liam said. "It's fine, Earl." He walked to his car. He had tonight's photos. He had Birch's signed statement. He had Claire's financial analysis. He had Victoria's signatures on the motions. He had 1 week, and now he also had confirmation of something he hadn't quite admitted to himself until this moment, that whoever was on the other end of Webb's Thursday calls had enough reach inside Mercy General to move pieces on the board with a single instruction. He sat in the parking garage with the engine off, in the quiet and the dark, and thought about a 5-year-old girl in a car accident and the decisions that got made about her life in the years that followed, and the man who'd been sitting in the room with her ever since, holding her hand and saying all the right things. Then he took out his phone and called Claire. She answered on the second ring. "I got the photos," she said. "It's enough." "Good," Liam said, "because we're almost out of time." Claire filed the injunctive motions on a Friday morning at 9:47, and by 11 the same day, Gerald Forsyth knew about it. Liam found out because Victoria called him, not on the hospital network, on his personal cell, which he now had, at 11:23, while he was at the grocery store with Noah picking out cereal. He knows, she said. Liam moved down the aisle away from his son. How fast? Fast enough that he was in my room by 11:15. He came in like a concerned friend, sat down, held my hand. She paused. He told me he'd heard I'd been working with outside counsel and that he was worried I was being taken advantage of, that there were people who preyed on wealthy patients in vulnerable situations, that he just wanted to protect me. What did you say? I told him I appreciated his concern. Her voice was very flat. I smiled at him for 10 minutes and waited for him to leave. Liam stood between two shelving units in the cereal aisle and looked at a box of Noah's preferred brand without seeing it. Did he threaten anything directly? Nothing direct. He mentioned casually that the medical review board takes a dim view of patients who become combative during their assessment period, that it can affect the clinical picture, that he hoped I was feeling stable. Another pause. He used the word stable 4 times in 10 minutes. That's a message. That's a very clear message. Noah had appeared at the end of the aisle, holding a different cereal box and looking at Liam with the patient, evaluating expression he used when he was trying to decide whether to interrupt. Liam held up one finger. Noah stayed where he was. Claire's motions, Liam said. Will they hold? She thinks so. The injunction would freeze Forsyth's trust authority for 60 days pending investigation. If the court grants it, he can't file the capacity assessment without court oversight. If they grant it quickly, within the week, we have time. A pause. If the judge takes longer, or if Forsyth can get it thrown out, Webb files the assessment and we lose the window. What does Claire need from us in the meantime? She needs Birch. Not just the signed statement, she wants him to appear before the court in a formal capacity if the injunction is challenged. She needs to know if he'll do that. I'll call him today. Liam? She stopped, started again. Forsyth is going to come after you, not personally. He'll use the institution. I think the reassignment is the first move. There will be others. I want you to understand that, and I want you to decide with clear information whether you want to continue. Liam looked down the aisle at Noah, who had started reading the back of the cereal box with his full studious attention. 8 years old, leg brace, Transcontinental Railroad. 40% of physical therapy costs coming out of Liam's pocket. I already decided, Liam said. Let me know what Claire needs. He hung up and walked back to his son. Can we get this one? Noah held up the box. That's mostly sugar. So is the other one. The other one is slightly less, mostly sugar. Noah considered the relative sugar merits of both options with genuine deliberation. Fine, he said finally, and put the box back. They finished the shopping. Liam drove home, put the groceries away, and called Dr. Birch from the back porch while Noah watched his railroad documentary. Birch listened to everything without interrupting. When Liam finished, there was a pause. You're asking me to testify, Birch said. Claire would need you available if the injunction is challenged. It might not come to that. But it might? Yes. Another pause. I'm 71 years old and I've been retired for 6 years and I live very quietly, Birch said. I have a vegetable garden and a dog, and I play chess badly against my neighbor every Tuesday. A beat. I've also spent 30 years knowing, in some part of myself, that something happened with that case that I never got to the bottom of. I filed a concern report and I watched it disappear and I told myself I'd done what I could. He was quiet for a moment. I'll do it. If it comes to that, I'll do it. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just make sure your attorney knows what she's doing. She knows what she's doing. Good. A pause. How's the patient? She's holding, Liam said. She's a lot stronger than anyone's given her credit for. That would fit, Birch said. The ones who've been fighting a long time usually are. The injunction hearing was scheduled for the following Wednesday. In the 5 days between Claire's filing and the hearing, things moved with the particular compressed intensity of a situation that had been slow building for months and was now accelerating towards something unavoidable. On Saturday, Liam was called into HR for a meeting about his reassignment. The woman across the desk from him was pleasant and impersonal in equal measure and explained that the West Wing maintenance position was a lateral move with no change in pay and that the transition was expected to be complete by the following Monday. When Liam asked why the East Wing needed a staffing change, she said it was a routine operational adjustment. When he asked who had initiated it, she said it had come through the departmental review process. When he asked which department, she printed out a form for him to sign, acknowledging the reassignment, and slid it across the desk. He signed it. There was nothing to be gained by refusing. On Sunday evening, he received a call from a number he didn't recognize. The man on the other end introduced himself as an investigator from the hospital's internal compliance office. He said there had been a report filed suggesting that Liam had accessed restricted areas of the building outside his authorized maintenance zone, and that the compliance office was required to investigate all such reports. He was very professional about it. He asked Liam to come in for an interview on Monday morning. Liam said he'd be there. He called Claire immediately after. "They're building a case to terminate you," she said. "If they can get you fired for cause before the injunction hearing, your access to Victoria is cut off and your testimony, if it comes to that, is compromised by the suggestion that you were operating improperly inside the institution." But can they actually fire me? I was in an area I had physical access to during my normal shift hours. Whether they can make it stick is secondary. They only need to get you off the campus and away from her before Wednesday. Claire's voice was precise and a degree grimmer than her usual register. "Don't say anything at that interview that you're not comfortable with. You have the right to have someone present with you." "Do I need a lawyer present?" "For an HR interview, technically no. Practically, it would be better. I can refer you to a labor attorney who can be there Monday morning." "Okay." "Liam, one more thing. I need you to understand the full shape of this." A pause. "The financial irregularities I found in the trust accounting. I've shared a summary with a contact at the State Financial Crimes Unit. Not a formal referral yet. But if the injunction is granted Wednesday and the court orders discovery, the financial picture will become very clear very fast. At that point, this stops being a civil matter." Another pause. "Forsyth is not going to let this get to that point without a fight. I don't know exactly what that looks like, but I want you to be prepared." After he hung up, Liam sat in the kitchen for a while in the quiet. Noah was asleep. The apartment was the way it always was at night, the small, ordinary accumulation of a life. Noah's sneakers by the door, a half-finished drawing on the kitchen table, the noise of the refrigerator cycling on. He thought about what prepared meant. He wasn't entirely sure he knew. The compliance interview on Monday morning was exactly what Claire had predicted. Careful, methodical, and designed to produce a documentation trail rather than to genuinely investigate anything. The labor attorney Claire had referred him to was a wiry man named Dennis Park, who arrived with a legal pad and a cup of coffee, and had the efficient, unsentimental quality of someone who'd sat through a lot of these and found them more tedious than intimidating. He let the compliance officer lead the interview and interjected 4 times, each time precisely, to redirect a question that was going somewhere it shouldn't go. The compliance officer asked Liam about his presence in the basement archive area. Liam confirmed that he had been in that area on several occasions during his shift. He said he had legitimate access to that section of the building. He confirmed that he had not removed any documents or materials. He said nothing about photographs. The officer asked about his relationship with the patient in room 19 East Wing. Liam said they had spoken on a number of occasions during the course of his duties. He said this was not unusual. The night shift was quiet, and brief interactions with patients who were awake were common. The officer asked whether Liam had shared any patient information with external parties. Dennis interjected before Liam could answer and said the question as framed was overbroad. The officer rephrased. Liam said he had not shared confidential patient medical information with anyone. This was technically true. The documents he had shared with Claire were institutional administrative records, not medical files. Liam had thought carefully about this distinction. They were done in 45 minutes. Dennis walked Liam to the parking lot and said, "They didn't have anything. They were fishing. If they fire you over this interview, you'll have a wrongful termination case that would cost them more than it's worth." He finished his coffee. "What's happening Wednesday?" "Injunction hearing. The patient's attorney is asking the court to freeze a trust executive's authority pending investigation of financial misconduct." Dennis looked at him over the empty coffee cup. And you're in the middle of this because I found the documents. Right. He crumpled the cup. Stay low until Wednesday. Don't go anywhere in that building. You don't have to be. Whoosh. Liam was moved to the West Wing on Monday afternoon. The West Wing was older, less polished, and housed general medical and post-surgical recovery wards. It smelled more like a hospital. The corridors were longer and the lighting was harsher, and nobody had paid extra to make the air smell like anything. He did his job. He cleaned. He moved through his section at the pace he'd developed over 2 years, efficient and quiet, and he thought about Victoria on the other side of the building in her warm-walled room, and about what was happening outside the building in Claire's 40 miles away office, and about Noah at home probably watching something about railways. On Tuesday night, one day before the hearing, Victoria found a way to reach him. She had a tablet that was connected to her personal data plan, not the hospital network, and she sent him a message through an encrypted app that Claire had recommended they both install. The message was brief. Webb came to my room this afternoon with 2 members of the clinical team. He told me they were conducting an unscheduled evaluation due to a notation in my chart about increased psychological distress. There was no such notation. I know because I've been quietly accessing my own chart through my patient rights portal, and I would have seen it. He's manufacturing records. A pause in the message thread, then he's going to file something before Wednesday. Liam typed back. Does Claire know? Calling her now. What do you need from me? A longer pause, then, nothing right now, just stay close. He read that last message a few times, then he set his phone back in his pocket and kept working. Claire called Liam at 7 the next morning, Wednesday, the day of the hearing. Webb filed an emergency clinical notation yesterday evening, she said. It's been added to Victoria's record. It describes a significant deterioration in her psychological and neurological status over the last 3 weeks. It recommends immediate suspension of patient autonomy decisions pending full reassessment. Liam's jaw tightened. Can he do that? He did it. Whether it holds up is what this morning is about. A pause. The judge has the filing. Our attorney is arguing right now that the filing is retaliatory and fabricated. We've submitted the timeline. The notation appeared within 48 hours of our injunction request, which is not a coincidence anyone can argue with a straight face. Another pause. I need you to understand something, Liam. If the judge accepts Webb's filing as valid, even temporarily, it changes Victoria's legal status in a way that's difficult to undo quickly. Forsyth's attorneys can use it to argue she's not competent to have authorized our filing in the first place. Can they succeed with that? They can try. We're fighting it. But the next 6 hours are significant. He went to Noah's school, dropped him off, drove to a diner near the hospital, and ordered breakfast he barely touched. He sat by the window and watched the morning street and waited. At 10:18, Claire called. The injunction was granted, she said. He could hear something in her voice, not triumph exactly, more like the release of sustained pressure. The judge found sufficient grounds to freeze Forsyth's trust authority for 60 days pending investigation. Webb's emergency notation was flagged as procedurally irregular and has been referred to the medical board for independent review. A pause. It's not over. 60 days is a window, not a resolution. But Forsyth cannot act through the trust while the freeze is in place, and he cannot file the capacity assessment without court oversight. Liam pressed his hand flat on the diner table. Exhaled slowly. What happens now? Now the investigation begins. Financial forensics, formal discovery, and... Liam, I've been in contact with the State Financial Crimes Unit since Sunday. They've opened a preliminary inquiry into the trust accounting. Her voice was careful. This is going to get significantly more public very quickly. Forsyth is going to understand that containment is no longer possible. And Victoria? Victoria is still in that building, and until this is fully resolved, she is still, technically, in a vulnerable position. The injunction protects her legal autonomy. It doesn't physically protect her from people who have access to her daily care. He thought about that for a moment. She needs to not be in that building. She's been my patient at Mercy General for 8 months, and transferring her requires authorization from Webb, Liam said. Yes. He sat back. What if she doesn't transfer? What if she discharges herself? She has the right. A pause. Self-discharge against medical advice is within her rights, yes. Webb could formally object, which goes on the record, but he can't physically prevent her from leaving. Does she need a medical destination? Can she discharge to home care? With appropriate arrangements, yes. Then let's make the arrangements. Another pause. Longer. You're suggesting she discharge herself today. I'm suggesting she not spend another night in a building where the medical director is manufacturing records about her condition. He kept his voice level. Claire, is there any actual clinical reason she can't discharge to a home care environment with appropriate medical support? The question of whether she needs inpatient rehabilitation at this level has been compromised by what we've found about the program she's been receiving. A pause. Medically, the honest answer is we don't actually know what she needs because she's never been properly assessed. Then let's get her properly assessed somewhere that isn't controlled by the people who've been managing her for 25 years. A silence that felt like calculation. I'll call Victoria, Claire said. Well, Victoria discharged herself from Mercy General Hospital at 2:45 that afternoon. It was not elegant. It was not smooth. Webb was notified per protocol when she formally initiated the discharge process, and within 20 minutes he was in her room with 2 members of his clinical team and a concerned expression that didn't reach his eyes. Victoria, he said, I strongly advise against this. Your current clinical picture. My current clinical picture, Victoria said, from where she was supervising the packing of her personal items, with the focused calm of someone who had decided exactly how this was going to go, is one that I'm having independently reviewed, as is my right. The notation in your file is under review by the medical board. She looked at him directly. I know about the filing, Marcus. I know when it was filed and I know why. We both know what the board review is going to find. Webb's expression didn't break. He was a very controlled man, but something shifted in his posture. A slight reorientation, like a person recalculating their position in a room. You're making a serious mistake, he said. I've made many, Victoria said. Most of them involve trusting people who didn't deserve it. I'm working on that. She turned back to her things. You can go. He stood there for another moment. The 2 clinical team members looked at the floor. Then Webb turned and walked out. Victoria let out a breath. Her hands, Liam noticed from where he was standing in the doorway. He'd come to the East Wing one last time, technically outside his new assigned section, and he was probably going to hear about that. Her hands were not entirely steady as she continued packing. He stepped into the room. Let me get that, he said, taking the heavier bag from the chair. She looked at him. Her eyes were bright, and there was a tightness around them that he recognized as the aftermath of holding something together for a long time. You're supposed to be in the West Wing, she said. I know. You're going to get in trouble. Probably. He zipped the bag. How are you feeling? I'm terrified, she said. Simply, without performance. It was the first time he'd heard her use that word about herself. I've been in an institution of one kind or another since I was 5 years old. I don't know what it looks like to be somewhere else. He held the bag and looked at her. It looks like figuring things out as you go, he said, which you're already doing. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she straightened in her chair. The controlled, precise posture that was so habitual it had become structural, and said, Get the other bag. He got the other bag. They went down in the elevator and out through the main entrance. A car was waiting. Claire had arranged it. The afternoon was gray and cool, with the thick, low sky of a city that might rain but hadn't decided yet. Victoria stopped in the entrance alcove and looked at the parking lot and the street beyond it, and the ordinary movement of a Tuesday afternoon in a city that had no idea what had just happened inside this building. I've been looking at that through a window for 8 months, she said very quietly. Liam stood beside her. He didn't say anything. After a moment, she moved forward through the automatic doors out into the open air. She went to a private residence that Claire had arranged, a secured rental in a different part of the city with medical-grade accessibility features that had been set up in the previous 48 hours by a logistics team working off Claire's direction. It wasn't Victoria's own home. Her primary residence was connected to the Hale corporate structure in ways that Claire wasn't sure were secure, but it was clean and quiet, and nobody connected to Forsyth or Webb had any reason to know about it. Liam drove her there. That was not a professional decision. It was a personal one, and he didn't agonize over it. On the way, Victoria was quiet for a long stretch. The city moved past the windows. Then she said, "Tell me about Noah's mother." Liam glanced at her. "Why?" "Because you know almost everything about me and I know almost nothing about you, and because I think about it sometimes. How you do this alone." He watched the road. "Her name is Sarah. We met young, got serious fast. Neither of us was ready for what we turned into when things got hard. When Noah was diagnosed, she tried. For about a year she tried really hard, and then one day she didn't anymore." He paused. "I don't think she's a bad person. I think she was someone who discovered that the version of her life she'd imagined wasn't the one she was living, and she didn't know how to adjust to that. That must have been very lonely." "It was. For a while." He thought about it. "Then it just became life. You stop comparing it to what you thought it was going to be, and you just live the version you have." Victoria was quiet for a moment. "I've been doing that in reverse," she said, "accepting the version I was told I had, not considering there might be another one." "There might be," Liam said carefully. "Birch thinks so." "Yeah." "Have you thought about what that means? If his assessment is correct, if the treatment works?" Liam had thought about it. He'd thought about it more than he'd let himself fully acknowledge. "I think it means your life changes in a way that's going to be hard and painful and take a long time and probably won't look the way you imagine it." "That's not a reassuring answer. You didn't ask for reassurance." He glanced at her again. "You asked what it means." She looked out the window. "I'm afraid to hope for it," she said. "I've spent 25 years not hoping for it. It's very well defended, that absence of hope." "I know." "You don't—" "Not the same thing," he said. "But I know what it is to protect yourself from wanting something you don't believe you're going to get." He paused. "It works, right up until it doesn't." The car was quiet for a while. "When Birch evaluates me," she said, "if there's something there, if there's any possibility, I want you to know that I'm going to pursue it, completely, whatever it takes. I know that. I'm not telling you for reassurance. I'm telling you because—" She stopped, tried again. "Because you found this. And I want you to know that you didn't find it for nothing." Liam nodded slowly. They didn't speak again until he pulled up to the rental property and got out to help with the bags. Forsyth made his move 3 days later. Liam found out from Claire, who called at 8 in the morning while he was making Noah's lunch. "He's filed a counter motion," she said. "He's claiming the injunction was obtained through fraudulent misrepresentation, arguing that the documents used to support it were improperly obtained by a non-authorized party, meaning you, and that Victoria was in a compromised psychological state when she authorized our filing." "Can he make that stick?" "The document access argument is thin, and we can defend it. The psychological state argument leans entirely on Webb's discredited notation, which the medical board is already reviewing, but he's also done something else." Her voice dropped a register. "He's filed a formal complaint with the hospital's board alleging that Victoria has been manipulated by a hospital employee, again you, and that her discharge and the entire legal action are the product of that manipulation." Liam set down the knife he was using. "He's saying I took advantage of a vulnerable patient. He's saying more than that. He's suggesting a financial motive, that you identified a wealthy patient and engineered a relationship for personal gain." The kitchen was very quiet. Noah was in the other room. Liam stared at the cutting board for a moment. "He's going to push that angle publicly," Claire continued. "If he can get that narrative into the press before our case is visible enough to counter it, it damages both you and Victoria. It frames the entire investigation as a product of bad faith." "What does Victoria say?" "Victoria says, and I'm quoting her directly, 'Let him try.'" A pause. "She's not wrong that we can counter it, but I want you prepared for what the next few weeks might look like. This is going to be public. Your name is going to be in stories you didn't ask to be in." Liam thought about that. About Noah coming home from school and asking why Dad's name was on somebody's phone. About his own mother, in a different state, reading something online. "Okay?" he said. "Okay? What do you need me to do?" A pause. "Stay visible, stay credible. Don't do anything that gives his narrative any oxygen. Another pause. And get ready, because Birch's assessment of Victoria is happening next week, and whatever comes out of it is going to be the next major development in all of this. After he hung up, Liam finished making Noah's lunch and packed it in the bag and took it to the other room where Noah was on the floor with 3 library books about the history of steam engines arranged around him in a careful semicircle. "Dad," Noah said without looking up, "did you know that in 1869 they connected the whole country by train?" "I did know that," Liam said. "A documentary told me, several times." Noah looked up. He studied his father's face with the careful attention he applied to things he was trying to understand. "Are you okay?" "Yeah, bud. I'm okay." "You look like when things are hard." Liam sat down on the floor beside him. "Things are a little hard right now," he said. "But we're fine. We're okay." Noah considered this. Then he picked up one of the library books and held it out. "Do you want to look at the part about the steam engine? It's pretty interesting." Liam took the book. "Yeah," he said. "I do. Shit." Raymond Birch arrived by train, which Liam noted with the kind of tired, sideways humor that surfaces in the middle of difficult things, on a Thursday afternoon. He was shorter than Liam had imagined, compact and precise, with white hair cut close and the cautious, observational quality of someone who'd spent a career looking at human bodies and trying to understand what they were doing and why. He shook Liam's hand in the entryway of the rental property and said, "You look tired." "I am tired," Liam said. "Good. Tired people are usually the ones doing something real." He looked around the entrance space. "Where is she?" Victoria was in the sitting room off the main hallway. She had positioned herself by the window in her chair, not the managed, performative composure of the hospital, but something more stripped back. She looked like a person who had recently stopped pretending to be fine and was in the process of figuring out what came after that. Birch walked in, looked at her and pulled a chair over from the other side of the room and sat down directly across from her. "You don't need me to tell you this is going to be thorough," he said. "I need to understand everything, all the way back. Not just what you've been told, but what you've felt, what you've noticed. Anything, even things that seem too small to mention." Victoria looked at him steadily. "How long do you need?" "Today is just conversation. I'll be back Saturday with equipment. Surface EMG, the sensory testing rig, the imaging referrals are already arranged for Monday." He settled back in the chair. "I've reviewed everything your attorney sent me. The clinical notes from the original injury, the early assessments, the referral that was made to my program in 2001. He paused. "The referral describes a pattern of involuntary motor activity in the lower extremities that was inconsistent with complete injury, activity that should not have been possible." I remember that," Victoria said quietly. Birch went still. "What do you remember?" "I was 9. I used to feel, I don't know how to describe it, like electricity. Deep in my legs, not consistent, not controllable, just occasionally there." She paused. "I told one of my therapists. She told me it was phantom sensation, normal with SCI." "Did it stop?" "Gradually, over a few years." Her voice was very even. "I assumed it meant things were getting worse, more permanent." She paused. I stopped mentioning it. Birch was quiet for a long moment. He wasn't writing anything down, but he had the focused attention of someone recording everything. "The fact that those sensations existed," he said carefully, "and then diminished rather than being redirected through treatment." He stopped. Started again with more control. "There were pathways, Victoria. Whatever we find when we do the formal assessment, there were pathways there when you were 9 years old. Whether there's enough left to work with now, that I don't know yet. But I want to be very clear about one thing." She looked at him. "The conclusion that your paralysis was permanent and untreatable was not a medical conclusion," he said. "It was a decision, made by people who had reasons that had nothing to do with your care." The room was very quiet. Victoria's jaw moved slightly. Her hands, in her lap, were very still. "I know that," she said. Her voice held. "I know that now." "I'm sorry it took this long," Birch said. And he meant it. It was in his voice. the weight of a man who had filed a report 30 years ago and never been able to follow it. "Don't apologize," Victoria said. "Just tell me what we can do." He nodded once. "That's what Saturday is for, again." Liam walked Birch out to his car in the early evening. The street was quiet, the light low and orange, the kind of spring evening that feels like a promise the season hasn't fully kept yet. "What's your honest assessment?" Liam said. "Not the clinical hedge, your honest read." Birch unlocked his car and stood by the door for a moment. "Honest read," he said. "The motor sensation she described at 9 years old, the pattern in the original injury documentation, the electrophysiological data we'll get Saturday. If it shows what I think it's going to show, there are residual pathways. Whether they're viable after 30 years of disuse is the question I genuinely cannot answer yet." He looked at Liam directly. "Recovery, if it happens, will not be what people imagine when they imagine it. It won't be a movie moment. It will be months of brutal, painful, demoralizing work. Some days will feel like nothing is happening. Some days will feel like it's getting worse." He paused. "She knows that. She knows it intellectually," Liam said. "Yes," Birch acknowledged this with a slight tilt of his head. "The day it becomes real. The first time she can't do something she thought she'd be able to do, the first major setback. That's a different kind of knowing." He got in the car. "She's going to need people around her who don't disappear when it gets hard." He drove away. Liam stood on the sidewalk in the fading light. Back inside, he could see through the sitting room window. Victoria was still by the window, looking out at the same evening street from the other side of the glass. And she wasn't performing anything for anyone. And she looked exactly like what she was, a person at the beginning of something enormous, holding herself together by force of will and the unfamiliar, fragile thing that was starting to look, despite everything she'd taught herself about not doing this, a little bit like hope. Liam went back inside. There was a lot still ahead of them. He'd deal with it like he dealt with everything, one thing at a time, starting with what was in front of him. Birch's Saturday assessment took 4 hours. He arrived at 8 in the morning with 2 equipment cases and a young colleague named Dr. Sasha Petrov, a neurophysiologist in her mid-30s who moved through the rental house with the quiet efficiency of someone accustomed to setting up clinical equipment in non-clinical spaces. She didn't say much, but she was careful and precise, and treated Victoria with the matter-of-fact directness that Victoria had always preferred to careful gentleness. Liam was not in the room for the assessment. He sat in the kitchen and drank coffee and helped Noah with a school project about state capitals that Noah had remembered at 9 the previous evening, with the specific casual timing children deploy when they want to induce maximum parental stress. They spread a map across the kitchen table, and Noah filled in the blanks while Liam helped him with the ones he missed and tried not to listen too hard to the sounds from down the hall. It was a long 4 hours. When Birch came to the kitchen doorway, his face was composed in the careful way of a physician who has learned to manage the gap between what he knows and what the person in front of him needs to hear and how. "Noah," Liam said, "why don't you take the map to your room and finish the last column?" Noah picked up the map with the unhurried compliance of a child who has learned to read certain tones in his father's voice. He nodded once to Birch on his way past, with the grave courtesy that strangers sometimes found disconcerting in an 8-year-old. Birch sat down. He put both hands flat on the kitchen table. "There are pathways," he said. Liam's chest did something complicated. "Viable ones. More than I expected, honestly. Sasha's EMG data shows residual activity in 3 muscle groups below the injury level that shouldn't be present in a complete lesion. The sensory testing shows partial preserved function in 2 dermatomes on the left side." He paused. "These aren't strong signals. They're attenuated, thin, like a wire that's been corroded. But they're there. After 30 years, they're there. What does that mean for recovery? It means there's a foundation to build on. It means the neural architecture was never entirely severed. It was suppressed, understimulated, left to atrophy without any intervention. The question now is how much function we can restore through intensive rehabilitation, neuromuscular stimulation, and time." He was quiet for a moment. "I want to be honest with you about what intensive means. I'm talking about a program that makes what she experienced at Mercy General look like a wellness retreat, daily sessions, some days twice daily. Functional electrical stimulation, weight-bearing programs, aquatic therapy, manual therapy. There will be pain. There will be setbacks that feel like losses. There will be days when the data shows progress and her body doesn't feel it. He looked at Liam steadily. And there will be days when her body does feel it. When something moves that wasn't moving before. Those days are... He paused, choosing the word. Those days are what you work toward. Does she know all of this? I just told her. She asked me 3 follow-up questions, all of them practical and precise, and then she said she wanted to start Monday. A slight pause. She also said she wanted you in the room when we discussed the program structure. She said, and I'm quoting, "He's going to be part of this whether we formalize it or not, so we might as well be organized about it." Liam looked at the kitchen table for a moment. "Monday then," he said. Victoria's apartment, the secured rental, was reconfigured over the weekend to accommodate the equipment the program would require. Birch arranged a loan of a functional electrical stimulation unit through a research contact. Sasha Petrov agreed to serve as the primary treating clinician, which meant she was at the apartment 6 mornings a week. A physical therapist named Joel, who had worked with Birch's former research program and was one of approximately 11 people in the country with meaningful experience in this specific type of incomplete SCI rehabilitation, drove up from 2 hours south and agreed to lead the manual therapy and weight-bearing components. It was not a smooth process getting all of this assembled. There were equipment delays and scheduling conflicts and a territorial dispute between Joel and Sasha on the second day that required Birch to mediate with the tired patience of a man who had seen this particular friction before. The insurance question was a separate disaster. The program didn't fit neatly into any coverage category, and Victoria's corporate insurance structure was currently in legal limbo along with everything else connected to the Hale Trust. Claire was working on it. In the meantime, Victoria was paying for it herself from personal liquid assets that were outside the trust's reach. She didn't mention the money. She mentioned the program constantly, asking questions, pushing on timelines, wanting to understand the mechanism behind every intervention in a way that Sasha initially found challenging and then came to appreciate, because a patient who understood why she was doing something was more likely to do it correctly. The first week was primarily assessment and baseline setting. The second week was when the work started in earnest. Liam was there most mornings. He'd taken a 2-week leave from Mercy General. HR had been oddly cooperative about this, which he suspected had something to do with the compliance investigation still being unresolved and the institution not wanting additional exposure. And he used the time to be present in a way that didn't have a formal name. He wasn't a therapist. He wasn't medical staff. He was someone who showed up, who knew when to stay and when to give space, who brought coffee for Sasha and lunch for Noah when his son came along on days when school was out, and who sat with Victoria in the evenings when the day's work had left her wrung out and aching and not particularly interested in performing composure for anyone. Those evenings were their own kind of thing. Not easy, but real. "I hate this," she told him one Thursday night. She was in her chair by the window, her jaw tight with residual pain, her left hand wrapped around a cup of tea she hadn't drunk. The day had gone badly. A session that had been showing progress had plateaued, and Joel had been professionally gentle about it in a way Victoria found more frustrating than directness. "I hate feeling like I'm fighting for something that might not be there." "It's there," Liam said. "You don't know that." "Birch's data says it's there." "Birch's data says there's a signal, a thin, corroded signal." She set the tea down. "Do you know what it feels like to work that hard and feel nothing? To have Sasha telling me the readings show activity and my body just nothing, like it's happening to someone else?" "Yeah," Liam said. She looked at him. "Noah's first year with his brace," he said. "He was supposed to be doing these exercises twice a day to strengthen the muscle groups around his hip. Every day I'd watch him do them, and he'd cry because it hurt and nothing seemed to be changing. For 2 months, nothing seemed to be changing." He paused. And then one day his PT measured his gait and said the improvement was significant. He'd been improving the whole time. We just couldn't see it. Victoria was quiet for a moment. "That's not the same situation." "No," Liam said, "but the feeling is the same. Working hard and not being able to see the point. That part is the same. She looked at him with the dark, precise eyes that didn't miss much. "You're very patient," she said. Not a compliment exactly, more like an observation that had something behind it. "I'm really not," Liam said. "I'm just here." She picked up the tea, drank some of it. "How is Noah's gait now?" "Better. Not perfect. He's going to need the brace probably through high school, but better." He paused. "He doesn't let it slow him down much. He just adapts his route, figures out how to get where he's going a different way." Victoria looked at the window. The city was its nighttime self outside, lit and indifferent. "I want to walk," she said, not dramatically, just as a fact, stated plainly. "I know that might not happen. I know the timelines are long and the outcomes are uncertain, but I want it. I've been pretending for 20 years that I didn't want it because wanting it and not getting it was too much. It was easier to not want it." She set the cup down again. "I'm done with easier." Liam nodded slowly. "Then we keep going," he said. The legal case was moving on a parallel track to the rehabilitation, and it moved with the particular grinding, uneven rhythm of institutional investigations. Periods of apparent stillness, followed by sudden lurches forward. The State Financial Crimes Unit formally opened an investigation into the Hale Family Trust in the 4th week of May. This was public, which meant it was in the news, which meant Victoria's name was attached to phrases like alleged financial manipulation and contested trust structure in ways that were technically accurate and contextually misleading, and which required Claire to issue a carefully worded statement clarifying that Victoria was the victim of the alleged misconduct, not a party to it. Forsyth's attorneys fought back with considerable force. They filed motions, challenged procedures, questioned document provenance, and maintained at every turn that their client had acted in good faith within the structures established by the late Robert Hale, and that the entire investigation was a product of a coordinated manipulation campaign engineered by a former hospital employee. They were expensive, strategic, and genuinely good at their jobs. Gerald Forsyth himself appeared in one press photograph, taken outside a courthouse, wearing a dark suit and a composed expression that communicated nothing. He looked like what he was, a man who had spent 24 years in boardrooms and knew how to present himself under scrutiny. He had not yet been charged with anything. The investigation was ongoing. Marcus Webb had been placed on administrative leave by Mercy General pending the medical board review. The hospital had issued a statement saying it was cooperating fully with all relevant inquiries, which was the institutional equivalent of covering your face while running. Liam's name was in 2 news articles. The first described him as a hospital maintenance worker who had raised concerns about a patient's care, accurate, stripped of all context. The second, planted by Forsyth's camp and published in a business-focused outlet, described him as a low-income single father with a history of accessing restricted areas of his workplace who had inserted himself into the life of a billionaire patient. This one included the phrase, "questions about motive," without ever specifying what the questions were. He read that one in the parking lot of Noah's school while waiting for pickup. He read it twice. Then he put his phone in his pocket and watched the school doors until Noah came out, listing slightly to the left the way he always did at the end of a long day when his hip was tired. "How was school?" Liam said. "We did fractions," Noah said. "They're not that hard." "Good." Noah studied him as they walked to the car. "Dad, is that bad thing still happening?" "Which bad thing?" "The one that makes you look like that." Liam unlocked the car. "It's still happening, but it's going okay." "Is the lady okay?" "The one you help." Liam looked at his son over the roof of the car. "She's working really hard at something difficult," he said. "She's doing okay." Noah got in the car. "I hope she gets better," he said simply, and put his seatbelt on. Liam got in and sat for a moment before starting the engine. "Me too, bud," he said. The 3rd week of June brought 2 things on the same day. The first, Claire called in the morning with the news that the forensic accounting team had completed their preliminary report on the trust structure, and the findings were, in her word, unambiguous. The layered transactions, the management services agreements, the affiliated entities. When mapped out fully, they showed a systematic extraction of funds from the Hale corporate structure that had been deliberately obscured across multiple accounting periods. The Financial Crimes Unit was moving toward formal charges. Claire estimated 60 to 90 days before an indictment. The second, Victoria called Liam at 3 in the afternoon. He was at the apartment anyway. He'd been working remotely that week, coordinating logistics for a new supply chain in Birch's expanded program. So he was in the kitchen when his phone buzzed and he saw her name. "Come to the therapy room," she said. The therapy room was what they'd started calling the large living space that had been cleared and reconfigured with the parallel bars and the mat table and the FES equipment and all the other machinery of the program. When Liam pushed open the door, he found Sasha standing near the wall with her tablet, Joel positioned at the end of the parallel bars with his arms crossed, and the careful expression of a man trying not to react too visibly to something, and Victoria. Victoria was at the start of the parallel bars, both hands gripping the rails. Weight partially shifted forward. "How long has this been happening?" Liam said. "Don't make it a thing," Victoria said with some difficulty. "I'm not making it a thing." "Your face is making it a thing." "My face is just my face." Sasha from the wall. "The sensory data shifted 6 days ago. We've been doing weight-bearing progression since Monday. Today she wanted to try active weight shift without the harness." Victoria's jaw was set in the way it got when she was working against something. Her arms were taking most of the load, but there was something different in how she was positioned. A slight forward engagement of the hips, an angle in her lower back that hadn't been there before. "I'm not going to walk," she said. "Don't stand there looking like that. I want to shift my weight. I want to feel it." "Okay," Liam said. He moved to the side of the bars and stood there while she worked. It took about 3 minutes of concentrated effort, small adjustments, Sasha quietly calling cues, Joel repositioning slightly at the far end. Victoria's breath was audible, controlled and deliberate, the way it got when she was treating pain like an administrative problem to be managed. And then she shifted her weight forward onto her left leg. Not fully, not dramatically. A partial weight transfer, maybe 30%. Her hands were still on the rails. Her arms were still working, but her leg took weight. She made a sound, not a cry, not a gasp, something smaller and more private than either. Just a single involuntary sound, like something had surprised her from inside. She held it for 6 seconds. Then her arms took back the load, and she settled. Nobody in the room spoke for a moment. "How did that feel?" Sasha said. Victoria looked at the end of the bars. Her face was doing several things at once, none of them quite resolving into an expression that could be named neatly. "Strange," she said. Her voice was not entirely steady. "It felt, I don't know, like something I used to know." Joel uncrossed his arms and wrote something on his clipboard in a way that was probably intended to be professional and unobtrusive and wasn't quite either. "Good," Sasha said. "We're going to build on that. Same exercise, twice tomorrow. We add resistance next week." Victoria nodded, her hands loosened on the rails. She let herself settle back into the baseline distribution. Her eyes moved to Liam. He looked at her steadily. He didn't say anything effusive. He didn't make it theatrical. He just looked at her with the kind of attention that said, "I saw that. I know what that cost. I'm not going anywhere." She held his gaze for a moment. Then she said, very dryly, "Stop looking like that." "My face," he said, "is just my face." Something that had been wound very tight inside that room loosened a few degrees. It's July. The work continued with the grinding, uneven quality that Birch had described. Days of measurable progress followed by days of apparent nothing, and occasional days of something worse than nothing, when Victoria's body seemed to resist the progress already made and everything felt like going backward. The worst of those happened in the second week of July. It was a Wednesday, and the session started well enough. Weight-bearing progressions, good sensory readings, and then something shifted. The signals dropped. Victoria's left leg refused to respond to the FES cues the way it had been responding for 2 weeks. She worked for 40 minutes on something that had felt within reach and couldn't get back to it. She didn't cry. She wasn't someone who cried easily, and she'd understood from the beginning that this was going to happen. But there was a particular quality to the silence she retreated into afterward. Sitting by the window, not looking at anything, a stillness that was different from her usual self-containment. This one had a hollow center. Liam sat in the room with her and didn't say anything useful for a while. He brought her water. She didn't drink it. He sat in the chair across from her and looked at his hands. "I keep thinking about the sessions at Mercy General," she said eventually. Her voice was flat. "I used to sit in those sessions and feel nothing and tell myself the protocol was appropriate and Webb knew what he was doing, and the entire time—" She stopped. "I wasted 8 months there. I've been wasting 25 years. "You didn't waste anything," Liam said. "I didn't fight hard enough." "You didn't know what you were fighting," he said. "That's different." He looked at her. "You were a 5-year-old kid who got hurt and then spent the next 25 years being managed by people who had decided what your life was going to be. You adapted. You built something extraordinary anyway. That's not waste. I know it doesn't feel like that today." He leaned forward with his elbows on his knees. "Today is a bad day. Bad days feel like the whole story. They're not the whole story." She looked at him. Her eyes were dark and tired and not particularly receptive to comfort. "You always know what to say." "I almost never know what to say," he said. "I'm just here long enough for something useful to come out eventually." The ghost of something moved across her face. Not quite a smile. The idea of one. "Liam," she said. "Yeah." A pause. "What is this? What are we doing?" She said it directly and without particular drama. The same way she asked questions in boardrooms, he suspected, wanting the actual answer, not the managed one. He considered it honestly. "I don't know exactly," he said. "I know that I'm here because I want to be here. That the work part of this and the other part of this, I don't know where one ends and the other starts anymore." "Is that a problem for you? Is it a problem for you?" She was quiet for a moment. "I've spent my adult life keeping people at a specific distance," she said. "It was very efficient. Nobody got close enough to see the parts I didn't want seen." Another pause. "You saw them anyway, before I had a chance to manage the distance." "Yeah," he said. "I don't know what to do with that," she said. Simply, without performance. "You don't have to do anything with it right now," he said. "We can just—" He gestured vaguely at the room, at the equipment, at the shared weight of everything that had led them here. "We can just keep doing this." She looked at him for a long moment. "Okay," she said. It wasn't a resolution, it wasn't a declaration. It was just two people in a room with a lot of hard work still ahead of them, deciding to stay in it together. That was enough for now. In August, the indictment came. Gerald Forsyth was formally charged with financial fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and conspiracy to defraud in connection with his management of the Hale Family Trust. The charges were extensive. Claire's contact at the Financial Crimes Unit told her privately that the full accounting, when it was complete, was likely to reveal a figure north of $600 million extracted from the Hale corporate structure over 24 years. Webb was separately charged with falsification of medical records and professional misconduct. The medical board had completed their review, and their findings were damning. The manufactured notation, the suppressed documentation, the departures from standard clinical practice, all of it was on record now. All of it was public. The day the indictments were announced, Liam was at the apartment when Victoria got the call from Claire. He watched her face as she listened. She was very still, the way she was still when things were large. When she hung up, she sat with her